The high-rise apartment of Alexander King was a marvel of modern design. Gleaming marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, and furniture that whispered of opulence. Yet, despite its grandeur, the apartment was eerily silent. Alexander King, a man who had achieved immense success and accumulated wealth beyond imagination, found himself enveloped in a profound sense of loneliness. It was a cold evening in late winter. The city lights twinkled like a million stars below, a reminder of the world outside Alexander's solitary existence. He sat in his expansive living room, a glass of aged whiskey in hand, staring at the reflection of the city in the darkened windows. His gaze was distant, lost in thought. "Sir, dinner is served," came the voice of his longtime maid, Martha, from the doorway. She had been with him for years, a constant presence in his life, but tonight her tone was tinged with a subtle sadness. Alexander turned to her, his expression softening. "Thank you, Martha. I'll be down shortly." He glanced at his watch. It was past 7, and he knew Martha had probably prepared a lavish meal as she always did. Yet the thought of eating alone at the grand dining table felt more like a chore than a pleasure. As Martha left, Alexander's mind wandered. Despite the opulence around him, he felt a gaping void. His career had been his focus, his passion, and his world. But now, success felt hollow. The people he once called friends had drifted away, and the few relationships he maintained were superficial at best. The void he felt was not merely the absence of people but the lack of genuine connection. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a text from his business partner, Henry. "Henry, just wanted to check in. How's the expansion project going?" Alexander sighed, typing back a quick response. "Alexander, on track. Thanks for checking in. I'll be in the office tomorrow." The response was terse, a reflection of his disinterest in any conversation that did not revolve around business. He put his phone away and rose from the couch, heading toward the dining room. The table was set impeccably, with fine china and silverware that had seen more dinners than the people who had dined at them. Martha had outdone herself with a gourmet meal, roast beef, vegetables, and a dessert that looked like it belonged in a high-end restaurant. "Martha, you've outdone yourself," Alexander said, attempting to mask the emptiness in his voice. Martha smiled faintly. "Thank you, sir. I hope you enjoy it." He took his seat, and as he began to eat, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his isolation. The clinking of silverware against china was the only sound that accompanied his meal, and the silence grew louder with each bite. A call came through on his phone again, this time from his assistant, Claire. "Claire, Mr. King, just a reminder that you have a conference call at 8 p.m. Do you need anything before then?" Alexander paused, looking at the half-eaten meal. "No, Claire. I'll be ready for the call. Thank you." After the call ended, he returned to his meal, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered a time when he had been more open to the idea of companionship. His relationships had been fleeting, though. Brief flings, a couple of serious romances that ended poorly. The relentless pursuit of success had always been his true love, leaving no room for anyone else. As he finished his meal, he felt a pang of regret. The grand apartment, the luxurious lifestyle, it all felt empty without someone to share it with. He wondered if he had sacrificed too much in his quest for success. Martha returned to clear the table. "Sir, if you need anything else, just let me know." He looked at her, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Thank you, Martha. You've been a great support all these years." She nodded, her gaze understanding. "You're welcome, sir." After she left, Alexander wandered to the large window, staring out at the city lights. The loneliness of his life seemed to stretch endlessly before him. As he gazed out at the vast expanse of lights, he wondered if the pursuit of success had been worth the cost of his happiness. The reflection of the city in the glass seemed to mock him, a glittering facade hiding the emptiness within. He was a lonely millionaire, surrounded by wealth and achievement, but yearning for something more. A genuine connection, a sense of belonging, and perhaps a chance to rediscover the person he had once been before success consumed him. The resignation of Martha, Alexander King's longtime maid, had left a significant void in his life. With her departure, Alexander found himself in need of someone new to manage the upkeep of his grand apartment. The search was exhaustive, but eventually he hired Sophia, a young woman with a strong work ethic and a polite demeanor. Little did she know that Alexander had devised a test to gauge her loyalty and integrity. It was a crisp winter morning when Sophia's first day began. The sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting a warm glow over the luxurious but still slightly cold space. Sophia arrived early, her uniform pristine, her expression a mix of determination and nervousness. Alexander, already at work in his home office, glanced at the clock. It was just past 9. He walked out into the grand foyer, where Sophia was busy dusting the high shelves. "Good morning, Miss Sophia," he said, his tone formal yet cordial. "I trust you're settling in well." Sophia looked up, her face brightening with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mr. King. Yes, everything is going well. Thank you for asking." He nodded, his expression neutral. "I'll be in my office if you need anything. Please make yourself comfortable, and let me know if there's anything you need." As Alexander retreated to his office, he couldn't help but scrutinize Sophia's every action. His mind was not at ease. The thought of replacing Martha was unsettling, and the idea of testing Sophia's trustworthiness felt like a necessary evil. In the living room, hidden in plain sight among the opulent decor, was a safe that was rarely used. Alexander had deliberately left it slightly open with a modest amount of cash inside. He had installed a discreet camera in the room, aiming to monitor Sophia's behavior without her knowledge. Sophia, meanwhile, cleaned diligently, moving from room to room with practiced efficiency. As she entered the living room, she paused momentarily, her eyes flicking towards the safe. She hesitated, then focused on her task with renewed vigor, ignoring the safe altogether. Hours passed, and Alexander, from his vantage point in the office, observed Sophia's work through the live feed on his computer screen. To his relief and slight surprise, she never touched the safe. Instead, she continued to clean meticulously, moving about the apartment with a sense of purpose. Just as Alexander began to relax, the live feed revealed an unexpected moment. Sophia, while dusting a bookshelf, reached for a photo album on the coffee table. She carefully picked up a photograph from the album, took a moment to look at it, then placed it back. The entire act was brief, almost imperceptible if one weren't paying close attention. Alexander's curiosity was piqued. He reviewed the footage again, focusing on the photograph. It was a picture of him from a long time ago. His younger self with a woman whose face was partially obscured by the angle of the photograph. Intrigued, Alexander decided to confront Sophia about the photograph, feeling the mixture of apprehension and curiosity. He found her in the kitchen, preparing a fresh batch of coffee. "Sophia, may I have a word?" Alexander asked, his voice carrying a hint of authority. Sophia looked up, her face slightly flushed from the physical work. "Of course, Mr. King. Is everything all right?" Alexander gestured for her to follow him to the study. "Please, come with me." Once they were alone, Alexander took a deep breath, trying to keep his tone even. "I noticed something unusual on the surveillance footage today. I saw you looking at a photograph from the living room." Sophia's eyes widened slightly, and she looked down, appearing troubled. "I didn't mean to intrude, Mr. King. I was just curious. It's a photo of someone I think I recognize." Alexander's eyebrows furrowed. "Really? Who do you think it is?" Sophia hesitated before speaking. "It's a photo of you, isn't it? But the woman in the picture, she looks a lot like my mother." Alexander's expression shifted to one of surprise and confusion. "Your mother?" Sophia nodded, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yes, my mother used to talk about someone from her past who looked a lot like you. She never said much, but it seemed important to her. The revelation hit Alexander like a jolt. Memories he had buried deep surfaced, memories of a past romance he had once shared with Sophia's mother. He had thought those days were long gone, but here was a reminder that they were very much alive. "I see," Alexander said quietly, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Would you mind telling me more about your mother and this connection?" Sophia took a deep breath. "My mother passed away a few years ago. Before she died, she spoke about a man who had hurt her deeply. I always thought it was just a painful memory for her, but seeing her picture, it brings up old questions." Alexander's face paled slightly as he absorbed this new information. I didn't know. I had no idea that this would affect you like this." Sophia's expression softened. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I was just trying to piece together a part of my mother's past." Alexander's mind raced, grappling with the unexpected turn of events. The test he had set up to gauge Sophia's integrity had inadvertently revealed a personal connection he had long tried to forget. "Well," Alexander said, trying to regain his composure, "I appreciate your honesty. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. For now, let's put this aside and focus on your work." Sophia nodded, her expression one of tentative relief. "Thank you, Mr. King. I'll get back to it." As Sophia returned to her duties, Alexander remained in the study, lost in thought. The revelation had stirred up old emotions, and he realized that this new maid, Sophia, had unknowingly become a bridge to a past he thought he had left behind. Sophia's first week at Alexander King's estate went by in a blur of cleaning and organizing. Her days were filled with the repetitive hum of her work, and her nights were quiet, allowing her to reflect on the unsettling revelation about her mother's past. Despite the emotional weight she carried, Sophia remained dedicated to her duties, determined to prove her worth. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the polished floors, Alexander decided to check in on Sophia's progress. He had almost forgotten the test he had set up with the safe and the hidden camera, his focus now more on the emerging connection to his past. He approached the living room, where Sophia was busily arranging a vase of fresh flowers on the coffee table. "Good afternoon, Sophia," Alexander greeted, trying to sound casual. "How are you finding everything so far?" Sophia looked up, her face brightening with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. King. Everything is going well. I'm just getting the house ready for the weekend." Alexander nodded, eyeing the safe discreetly. "I appreciate your hard work. It hasn't gone unnoticed." Sophia's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "Thank you. I've been trying to make sure everything is perfect." As Alexander continued his tour of the house, he kept an eye on the live feed from the hidden camera. His attention was particularly drawn to the living room, where Sophia was moving about, dusting and tidying up. Sophia was meticulous in her work. She dusted every surface with care, ensuring that not a speck of dust remained. As she reached the coffee table, she glanced at the safe, but instead of inspecting it, she focused on the photo album beside it. Alexander watched with bated breath as Sophia carefully picked up the album. She opened it slowly, her fingers tracing the edges of the photographs. After a moment, she pulled out a single photo, her eyes scanning it with a thoughtful expression. She didn't seem to notice the camera hidden above the mantel. Alexander's heart raced. Was she going to take the money? But Sophia didn't reach for the safe. Instead, she took a quick photograph of the photo she had removed from the album, then gently returned it to its place. Sophia's actions left Alexander bewildered. He decided to confront her about it directly, hoping to understand what she was doing. Later that evening, as Sophia was finishing her tasks, Alexander approached her in the kitchen. She was wiping down the counters, lost in her thoughts. "Sophia, may I speak with you for a moment?" Alexander's voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of tension. Sophia looked up, slightly startled. "Of course, Mr. King. What's wrong?" Alexander gestured for her to follow him to the study, where he closed the door behind them. I reviewed the footage from today and saw that you took a photograph from the album in the living room. Sophia's face flushed slightly, and she looked down, fidgeting with her apron. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. I saw the photograph and was curious about it. Alexander's eyes narrowed. Curious about what specifically? Sophia took a deep breath, her voice steadying. The photograph was of a young woman who looked a lot like my mother. I wasn't sure if it was her, so I wanted to keep a record of it to show to my family. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Alexander's expression softened, and he leaned against the desk, processing her words. So, you weren't trying to steal anything or violate my trust? Sophia shook her head vigorously. No, Mr. King. I would never do that. I was only trying to understand a part of my mother's past. Alexander's eyes met hers, and he could see the sincerity in her gaze. He felt a wave of relief mixed with guilt. I understand. I suppose I should have communicated more clearly. I was concerned about the safety, and I wanted to ensure you were trustworthy. Sophia nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and concern. I appreciate your honesty. I really didn't want to upset you. Alexander sighed, his posture relaxing. No, I should apologize for not being more transparent. It's a difficult time for me as well, with the recent changes. I'll make sure to address these issues directly if they arise again. Sophia gave a small, appreciative smile. Thank you for understanding. I'll be more careful in the future. Alexander nodded. I'll trust you to continue doing your job well. And if you need anything or have any concerns, please let me know. Sophia smiled, her relief evident. Thank you, Mr. King. I will. As Sophia returned to her work, Alexander remained in the study, reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. The photograph and Sophia's connection to his past had created a complex web of emotions. While he was relieved that Sophia had not betrayed his trust, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of connection to her story and a renewed curiosity about the past he thought he had buried. The next morning, the atmosphere at Alexander King's estate felt charged with unspoken questions and unresolved emotions. Sophia had tried to focus on her work, but the photograph she had taken lingered in her thoughts. The photograph had captured a younger Alexander with a woman who bore a striking resemblance to her mother. Sophia's curiosity and a sense of unresolved tension made her anxious. Alexander, meanwhile, had been grappling with his own internal conflict. The photograph had stirred memories he had long suppressed. He had been avoiding facing the truth about his past and the unfinished chapters of his life. As Alexander sipped his morning coffee in the study, he heard a knock on the door. He called out, "Come in." Sophia entered, holding a neatly wrapped package. Her expression was a mixture of determination and apprehension. "Mr. King, I need to speak with you about something important." Alexander looked up, noting the seriousness in her tone. "Of course, Sophia. What's on your mind?" Sophia took a deep breath and placed the package on the desk. "Yesterday, I took a photograph from the album, and it's been bothering me ever since. I need to understand something." Alexander gestured for her to continue, his curiosity piqued. "Please, go ahead." Sophia unwrapped the package to reveal the photograph she had taken. It showed a younger Alexander with a woman who looked very much like Sophia's mother. "This is the photograph I took. I showed it to my mother, and she confirmed that the woman in the photo is indeed her younger self. Her name was Emily." Alexander's face paled slightly. He set his coffee cup down, his hands trembling slightly. "Emily. I remember her. We were close many years ago." Sophia's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and hope. "I need to understand what happened between you two. My mother never spoke much about that time, but she always seemed haunted by it. She left home abruptly and cut ties with everyone." Alexander's gaze became distant, as if he was reliving memories he had tried to forget. "Emily and I were deeply in love. We had planned a future together, but circumstances were against us. I was focused on my career, and there were misunderstandings and missed opportunities. Eventually, she left, and I never had the chance to make amends. Sophia's voice softened, filled with empathy. So it wasn't just her leaving without a word. There was more to it. She always spoke of regret and missed chances. Alexander nodded slowly, his voice tinged with regret. Yes, I was so consumed by my ambition that I failed to see the pain I was causing. Emily's departure was a turning point for me. I realized too late how much I had sacrificed for success. Sophia's eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. My mother tried to rebuild her life, but she always carried the weight of that past with her. I've spent my life trying to piece together what happened, and now I see there's more to the story. Alexander's expression softened, and he looked at Sophia with a sense of newfound respect. I'm truly sorry for the pain Emily endured, and for any hurt I may have caused her and your family. I was young and thought only of my goals. I never realized the full impact of my actions. Sophia nodded, her voice steady but emotional. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. King. My mother's passing has left many unanswered questions, and I was hoping to find some closure for her sake. Alexander leaned back, reflecting on the gravity of the situation. I wish I could offer more than just words. Perhaps knowing that I regret the way things turned out might bring some solace. Sophia managed a small, grateful smile. It helps to understand the full story. Thank you for sharing this with me. I'll try to find peace knowing the past is not as mysterious as it once seemed. Alexander's eyes softened as he looked at Sophia. If there's anything more I can do to help, or if you have any other questions, please let me know. Sophia nodded. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. As Sophia left the study, Alexander remained behind, lost in thought. The revelation about Emily and the past he had tried to bury had stirred up a deep sense of remorse and reflection. He knew that reconciling with his past would be a challenging journey, but understanding Sophia's perspective had brought him one step closer to confronting his own regrets. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across Alexander King's estate. The day's events had left Alexander with a heavy heart, the weight of his past actions pressing down on him more than ever. After Sophia's revelation, he had retreated to his study, seeking solace in the familiar surroundings of his vast collection of books and artifacts, but finding little comfort. Sitting at his mahogany desk, Alexander stared out the window, lost in thought. The photograph of Emily had stirred memories he had long buried. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the photograph over in his mind, replaying moments of joy and regret. A knock on the door broke the silence, and his housekeeper, Mrs. Thompson, entered with a concerned look. Mr. King, are you all right? You've been in here for hours. Alexander turned to her, forcing a smile. I'm fine, Mrs. Thompson. Just lost in thought. Mrs. Thompson's eyes softened with understanding. It's never easy facing the past. If you need to talk, I'm here. Alexander sighed, feeling the burden of his emotions. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. It's just that today has been a reminder of how much I've lost. Seeing that photograph brought back memories I've tried to forget. Mrs. Thompson approached his desk and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Sometimes, confronting the past is the first step towards healing. It's clear you have regrets, but acknowledging them is important. Alexander looked up at her, his eyes reflecting deep sorrow. I thought I had moved past the pain of losing Emily. I buried it under the guise of success and ambition, but now it's all come flooding back. Mrs. Thompson gave him a reassuring smile. Life has a way of making us face the things we'd rather avoid. It's how we handle these moments that define us. Alexander nodded, taking a deep breath. I remember how Emily's departure shattered me. I was so focused on my career that I failed to see the damage I was causing. I thought I could bury my regrets under a mountain of achievements, but that photograph showed me how wrong I was. Mrs. Thompson sat down across from him, her expression gentle. You can't change the past, Mr. King, but you can make amends in the present. Perhaps there's a way to honor Emily's memory and find closure. Alexander contemplated her words, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. I want to make things right, but I don't know how. Sophia mentioned her mother's regrets, and it's clear that there's been lingering pain. Just then, the door opened again, and Sophia walked in, her face showing a mix of apprehension and determination. "Mr. King, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to discuss something with you." Alexander gestured for her to come in, his heart heavy with anticipation. "No interruption at all. Please, have a seat." Sophia took a seat opposite Alexander, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier. It's clear that there are unresolved feelings on both sides. I want to understand more about what happened between you and my mother." Alexander nodded, his voice filled with remorse. "I understand. It's not easy to revisit those memories, but I owe it to you and your mother to be honest." Sophia looked at him, her eyes searching for answers. "I'm grateful for your willingness to talk. My mother always held a deep sadness about the past, and understanding your perspective might bring some peace." Alexander leaned forward, his voice tinged with regret. "Emily and I were once inseparable. We had dreams and plans, but my ambition clouded my judgment. I didn't fully appreciate her sacrifices or the impact of my decisions." Sophia listened intently, her expression softening. "It sounds like you had genuine feelings for her. It must have been difficult to realize the mistakes after so many years." Alexander sighed deeply. "It was. Losing Emily was a turning point for me. I realized too late how much I had neglected the personal aspects of my life. I buried myself in work, thinking it would compensate for the pain I caused." Sophia nodded, her voice calm. "Understanding the past is a step towards healing. I'm not looking for apologies, but for clarity. Knowing that you recognize the impact of your actions helps." Alexander looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you for your understanding, Sophia. I hope that by acknowledging the past, we can find some resolution and perhaps even honor Emily's memory in a meaningful way." Sophia's eyes held a glimmer of hope. "That's all I want, for us to find a way to make peace with the past. I believe that's what my mother would have wanted too." As Sophia stood to leave, Alexander felt a profound sense of relief. The conversations of the day had opened old wounds, but they also provided a path forward. He knew that confronting his past was only the beginning, but with Sophia's understanding and his own willingness to face the truth, he felt a glimmer of hope for reconciliation and personal growth. The days following the emotional confrontation with Sophia weighed heavily on Alexander King. Determined to make amends for the past and seek forgiveness, he set out to make things right. His first step was to find a way to honor Emily's memory and address the unresolved issues between them. Early one morning, Alexander sat at his desk, drafting a letter. The words flowed with sincerity and a deep sense of regret. He wanted to reach out to Emily's family, hoping to find some form of reconciliation. The letter was heartfelt, expressing his remorse and his desire to make amends. Just as he finished the letter, Mrs. Thompson entered the room, her expression one of curiosity and concern. "Mr. King, you seem to be deep in thought. Is everything all right?" Alexander looked up from his desk, his eyes reflecting both resolve and sadness. "I'm writing a letter to Emily's family. I want to apologize for the pain I caused and seek their forgiveness. I feel that this is a necessary step in moving forward." Mrs. Thompson nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I think that's a noble gesture. Sometimes, taking responsibility and reaching out can bring a sense of closure." Alexander folded the letter and sealed it with a heavy heart. "I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me. I want to make things right, even if it's just a small gesture." As he prepared to send the letter, he received a call from Sophia. Her voice on the other end was cautious but hopeful. "Mr. King, I received your letter. I appreciate your willingness to address the past. Can we meet to discuss it further?" Alexander agreed, and they arranged to meet at a quiet cafe near the estate. As he arrived, he saw Sophia already seated at a corner table, looking both anxious and hopeful. He approached her, offering a warm but somber smile. "Thank you for meeting with me, Sophia," Alexander said as he took a seat across from her. "I hope my letter reached you in good spirits." Sophia offered a small, appreciative smile. "It did. I'm grateful for your sincerity. I believe it's important to have this conversation face to face." Alexander took a deep breath, his voice earnest. "I want to express my deepest regrets for the way things ended with Emily. I realize now that my actions were driven by selfishness and ambition, and I failed to appreciate the person she was." Sophia listened intently, her eyes reflecting the weight of the conversation. "It's clear that you've given this a lot of thought. My mother spoke of you with mixed emotions, and understanding your perspective helps to make sense of her feelings." Alexander nodded, feeling the sting of old wounds. "I understand. I hope that my efforts to make amends can provide some measure of peace for you and your family. It's not just about seeking forgiveness, but also about acknowledging the impact of my actions." Sophia's voice softened. "It means a lot that you're taking responsibility. My mother's memory deserves respect, and your acknowledgement of the past is a step toward that." They sat in silence for a moment, both reflecting on the significance of the conversation. Alexander finally spoke, his voice filled with hope. "I would like to make a gesture to honor Emily's memory, perhaps a donation to a charity or scholarship in her name. I want to ensure that her legacy is remembered positively." Sophia's eyes brightened at the suggestion. "That would be a meaningful tribute. My mother always valued helping others, and I think she would appreciate such an act." Alexander smiled gratefully. "Thank you for your understanding. I hope this gesture can serve as a way to honor her and show that I've learned from my mistakes." Sophia extended her hand across the table, her expression sincere. "I think this is a good step forward. Let's work together to ensure that Emily's memory is honored in a way that reflects her values." Alexander shook her hand, feeling a sense of relief and resolution. "I'm grateful for your willingness to move forward. I hope this is a beginning of healing for all of us." As they parted ways, Alexander felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey toward forgiveness and healing was just beginning, but with Sophia's support and his own commitment to making amends, he felt hopeful for the future. The path ahead would be challenging, but the conversations of the day had given him a sense of clarity and a renewed determination to honor the past and build a better future. The weeks following Alexander's heartfelt conversation with Sophia were transformative. He was committed to honoring Emily's memory and using his wealth and influence for positive change. He had set up a charitable foundation in Emily's name, focusing on causes close to her heart, such as education and support for underprivileged families. The foundation's inaugural event was planned as a modest but meaningful affair. Alexander and Sophia worked together to organize it, and their collaboration marked the beginning of a new, positive chapter in both their lives. The day of the event arrived, and the venue was elegantly decorated with flowers and banners bearing Emily's name. Alexander stood at the entrance, greeting guests with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. He was dressed in a sharp suit, but the weariness from the past was visible in his eyes. Sophia approached him, her presence both reassuring and calming. "Mr. King, everything looks wonderful. I think Emily would be proud of what you've accomplished." Alexander smiled, though he was still overwhelmed by the gravity of the event. "Thank you, Sophia. I couldn't have done this without your support. It means a lot to me." As the guests arrived and mingled, Alexander and Sophia took a moment to step aside. They stood by a large display featuring photographs and information about the foundation's goals. "This is a new beginning for both of us," Sophia said, her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and relief. "It's more than just honoring my mother's memory. It's about making a difference in the lives of others." Alexander nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Yes, and it's about finding redemption and a way to move forward. I've learned so much from this experience." Just then, a young woman approached them, her expression warm and appreciative. "Mr. King, I'm so grateful for what you're doing. This foundation will make a huge difference for so many. Alexander looked at her with genuine gratitude. Thank you. It's important to me that we create a lasting impact. If there's anything specific you think we should focus on, please let me know. As the evening progressed, the event was a success, with heartfelt speeches and generous donations. Sophia noticed a shift in Alexander's demeanor. He was more relaxed and engaged, genuinely enjoying the interactions with the guests. Later in the evening, Alexander and Sophia found a quiet moment on the terrace, overlooking the city lights. "I've been thinking," Alexander began, "about how this journey has changed me. It's not just about honoring Emily's memory. It's about embracing new possibilities and understanding what truly matters." Sophia looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "I think this foundation is just the beginning. You've shown that you're capable of real change, and that's something to be proud of." Alexander took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. "I'm grateful for your support, Sophia. You've helped me see things from a different perspective. I hope we can continue working together to make a difference." Sophia smiled, her eyes reflecting hope and optimism. "I'd like that. We've both grown from this experience, and there's so much more we can achieve." As the event came to a close, Alexander and Sophia stood together, watching the guests leave with a sense of fulfillment. Alexander felt a weight lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of purpose and a renewed hope for the future. The next day, Alexander took a walk through the park, reflecting on the changes in his life. He realized that the journey of seeking forgiveness and making amends had not only brought him closer to his own humanity, but also opened doors to new opportunities and relationships. Sophia joined him for coffee later, and they talked about future plans for the foundation and their own personal growth. "Here's to new beginnings," Sophia said, raising her coffee cup. Alexander clinked his cup against hers, his eyes full of gratitude and optimism. "To new beginnings and to making a positive impact." As they continued their conversation, Alexander felt a sense of excitement for the future. The foundation was just the start of a new chapter, and with Sophia's support, he was ready to embrace the journey ahead.